Hello and welcome to Truth Crime Me podcast. Today we're diving into a tragic story from King County, Washington, a story that has left an entire community in shock. On October 21st, 2024, in the early morning hours, a 15-year-old boy made a frantic 911 call, claiming that his brother had murdered their entire family before taking his own life. But just minutes later, another call came in from the same neighborhood, suggesting a very different and chilling picture. This second call, made by a neighbor, alleged that the same 15-year-old boy was actually the one behind the tragedy, accused of shooting his entire family in cold blood. An 11-year-old sister managed to survive by playing dead, ultimately escaping to tell her story. This is a difficult and heartbreaking case, and we approach it with the utmost respect for the victims and all those affected. If you're new here, we cover true crime cases, both new and historic, with careful research and deep dives into the details. So if you're into true crime and want to support our work, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot, and it helps us continue bringing stories like these to light. Now, let's get into the details of the Humiston family tragedy. The events unfolded in a serene neighborhood of King County, Washington, shattering the peace and leaving residents in disbelief. In the early hours, around 5 a.m., a neighbor named Bradley Dennis made a harrowing 911 call. According to Bradley, an 11-year-old girl from the Humiston family had arrived at his home in a frantic state, covered in blood with gunshot wounds to her neck and hand. Understandably terrified, she told Bradley and his family that her entire family had been shot, and she believed they were all dead. For her safety, we'll refer to her as Beau. Beau's account was both chilling and heartbreaking. She recounted to the dispatcher that her 15-year-old brother, whom we'll call Drew, was the shooter. In her recounting of the events, she described hearing terrifying sounds of gunfire and screams before catching sight of Drew holding their father's Glock handgun, wearing a checkered shirt. In a desperate attempt to survive, BH pretended to be dead after Drew shot her, hitting her in both her hand and neck. When he finally left her room, BH summoned all her courage, escaped through a window, and ran to her neighbor's house for help. To make matters even more complex, Drew himself had called 911 just minutes before BH's escape, frantically claiming that his brother Benjamin had killed their entire family before taking his own life. Drew claimed he was hiding in a downstairs bathroom, paralyzed with fear, and even suggested a possible motive, saying Benjamin had been caught looking at explicit content the night before and was about to face severe punishment. But as Beau's story unfolded, Drew's version began to unravel, painting a picture of deception and betrayal within the walls of the Humiston home. When law enforcement arrived, they found Drew in the driveway and immediately arrested him. Inside, the home bore the tragic evidence of a brutal crime scene, with each room and hallway telling a horrific story. Officers discovered the lifeless bodies of Drew's family members, and blood spattered throughout the house spoke volumes about the violence that had taken place. Scene examination: the Humiston family had been a vibrant, close-knit group with deep roots in the community. Mark, the father, was a respected engineer whose job provided the family a comfortable, suburban life. They lived in a picturesque, upscale neighborhood known for its natural beauty and outdoor activities, with well-maintained homes, luxury cars in the driveways, and private prep schools nearby. To those who knew them, the Humistons were a dream family, active, supportive, and full of love. But on that fateful October morning, the neighborhood's peaceful image was shattered. According to BH's account, Drew had recently been struggling academically and had failed several school tests, a source of tension within the family. Drew was reportedly familiar with the code to his father's gun lockbox, which contained a Glock handgun kept near the front door for quick access when Mark left for work. These small details painted a picture of a teenager under pressure, yet nothing could foreshadow the tragedy that would occur. The events unfold as police investigated the crime scene. They found clear signs that Drew had allegedly staged parts of the scene in an attempt to frame his brother Benjamin. Forensic examiners discovered Drew had gone to great lengths to make it look like Benjamin was responsible. Inside the family's home, they found blood smears on walls and floors, consistent with attempts to manipulate the bodies and weapons to fit his story. The chilling evidence revealed that Drew had even called 911 himself, claiming Benjamin was the one behind the massacre. Adding to the horror, BH shared an unnerving detail about Drew's behavior immediately after the shootings. She described hearing him casually talking on the phone after the gunshots, a moment that struck her as disturbingly calm amidst the chaos. In the seconds after Drew allegedly left her room, she held her breath, hoping he would leave without realizing she was still alive. Only after hearing him move to another part of the house did she make her daring escape, sprinting to her neighbor's house and recounting the terrifying details to them. When police arrived and secured the house, they quickly began the painstaking process of collecting evidence and surveying the scene. The officers' initial discovery was chilling. They found the Glock handgun used in the killings lying on the floor in the hallway, its magazine empty. The gun itself, a .45 caliber Glock 21, had clearly been fired multiple times, and traces of gunpowder residue hinted that the weapon had been discharged in close quarters. The weapon's presence, coupled with the surrounding evidence, pointed directly to Drew as the prime suspect. As officers moved into the foyer area, they noted a small, open gun lockbox and an empty pistol holster lying close to the front door. This lockbox, belonging to Mark, was typically kept secure, as Mark had been diligent about firearm safety in the home. Yet Drew had somehow gained access to it. This detail raised significant questions. Had Drew known the lockbox code all along, or had he learned it through some other means, planning this horrific event in advance? The empty holster and lockbox painted a disturbing picture of a calculated act, as Drew seemingly removed the weapon with intent, knowing exactly where it was stored. The officers continued through the house, their every step bringing them closer to the devastating reality of the scene. Moving deeper into the house, the evidence became even more tragic. The police encountered the bodies of each family member in different rooms, lying in positions that suggested they had been caught off guard and had no chance to defend themselves. Each room told a silent story of fear and desperation. The body of Mark, the father, was discovered in the living room, slumped over, with several gunshot wounds indicating he had been shot at close range. His position suggested he had been sitting, perhaps unwinding after a long day, when the attack occurred. Mark's injuries were particularly severe, as one fatal shot had struck the back of his head, suggesting he had not anticipated the danger and had likely been ambushed from behind. There were signs of a struggle nearby, a coffee cup shattered on the floor and a few furniture items knocked over, possibly indicating Mark's final attempts to defend himself. Moving into the adjoining rooms, the officers found Drew's mother, Sarah. Her injuries were equally horrific. She appeared to have been struck multiple times, with gunshot wounds on her torso and chest. It seemed likely she had either run to Mark's aid or attempted to confront her son before meeting her tragic end. Near her body, officers found traces of blood spattered on the walls, revealing the close range and violent nature of her final moments. Her hands showed signs of defensive wounds, as though she had tried to shield herself from the bullets, a heartbreaking reminder of her desperate will to survive. Then, in a smaller room upstairs, they found Joshua, the youngest in the family. He had been shot directly in the forehead, and his small body lay crumpled on the floor, a tragic victim of unimaginable violence. The proximity of his wounds suggested he had been targeted with chilling precision, the shooter standing mere feet away. There were no signs of a struggle, indicating he had no warning of the attack, an image that left even the seasoned officers shaken. Next, they found Catherine, the eldest sister, whose body bore similar gunshot wounds across her skull. Her position indicated she had likely tried to flee the scene or reach another family member in those terrifying final moments. Her room was in disarray, with books scattered and her bed pushed slightly out of place, as though she had been caught mid-movement. The officers could only imagine the horror she felt in those last seconds, her attempts to escape tragically cut short. Lastly, they reached Benjamin's room, where his body was found with 2 gunshot wounds, one fatal shot to the chest. The forensic evidence showed that, unlike Drew's claim, Benjamin did not have blood or gunpowder residue on his hands, meaning he had not fired a weapon that night. This was a critical detail. It contradicted Drew's initial call and was a crucial factor in linking Drew to the crime. In every room, the blood spatter and body positions echoed Boo's story. Drew's attempt to mislead the authorities with his initial 911 call claiming Benjamin had committed the murders before taking his own life was shattered by the undeniable forensic evidence. The open gun lockbox, the empty holster, and the precise manner of each killing all pointed back to Drew as the orchestrator of this horrific crime. The forensic findings, the medical examiner's findings, painted a clearer picture of the tragedy. Mark, the father, had sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including a fatal shot to the back of the head. Joshua, the youngest, had a single gunshot wound to his forehead, while Catherine suffered a similar fatal injury across her skull. Sarah, the mother, endured multiple gunshot wounds, and her injuries suggested close-range shots. Benjamin's wounds, however, were the most telling. His injuries indicated he was not the shooter. Forensics found no signs of blood or gunpowder on his hands or gun, contradicting Drew's claim and reinforcing the narrative that Benjamin had been framed. Current status and charges: Drew is now facing 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Held at the Clark Child and Family Justice Center, a facility for juvenile offenders, prosecutors are pushing for a hearing to determine if Drew should be tried as an adult. If convicted in adult court, Drew could face 25 years to life. However, if the case remains in juvenile court, he may only be held until age 25. This heartbreaking story has shaken the entire community, and it's far from over as the legal proceedings continue. Was this truly an unthinkable act by a troubled teenager, or is there even more to this tragedy that we don't yet understand? As always, we'll be following this case closely, providing you with updates as new details come to light. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to Truth Crime Me podcast for more true crime stories and in-depth coverage. Your support helps us continue sharing these important, often tragic stories with respect and integrity. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.